Hello, this is Gloria Espitia, Mexican-American Community Archivist at the Austin History Center. Today is Monday, September the 16th, 2013. It is currently 10:28 a.m. I am conducting this oral history interview at the Austin History Center in the Holt Gallery and Reception Room. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing two family members, brother and sister, and also members of the Brown Berets back in the 70s and 1980s. First, we're going to start with Susana. Susana, if you will give me your full name and spell it out for transcription purposes.
Okay, it's Susana Renteria Almanza, and that's Susana. Renteria is Renteria, and then Almanza, Almanza.
Okay, and Pio.
My name is Sabino, Pio Renteria, SabinoPioRenteria.
Okay. Now, if y'all will both tell me a little bit about your background, about your family. Y'all were both born and raised here in Austin, but give me a little synopsis of your family background, how many children there were, where you fit in that family structure.
Mm-hmm.
I can go first. There were 11 children in our family. My father was Miguel Renteria, and my mom was named Tomasa Renteria. There were 11 in our family. There was two sets of twins. The first set of twins, my older sister, her brother died at birth, so that made us 10. We lived in a very, very poor neighborhood. We grew up in a house that most of our housing at that time was really bordered in the 10th Street in East Austin. The housing conditions were really, really bad at that time. People were really struggling, and with those kind of kids, I was the sort of like fourth member of the fourth oldest. Well, I was the youngest, fourth youngest, or whatever you want to call them. But I grew up there in the Guadalupe neighborhood, and we lived at 1205 East 10th Street. We were a block away from the house. We didn't have any kind of running water or restrooms. We had an outhouse in the back, so it was a very, very poor condition. Everybody in that whole neighborhood didn't realize it, but we were really poor. We grew up and we were discriminated against by everyone. The police hated us because we were just the poor side of town, and there was a lot of crime. And we lived right off 11th Street, which was the sort of like the black red light district, where all the UT students would come down here on Saturdays or Saturday night and party and just did whatever they want to, because there was all the black bars that were on 11th Street, and it was one of the popular places for black kids to come and do whatever. White kids to come from UT to come and drink and party and do whatever they wanted to do.
What time period was that? About what years were they?
This was in the 60s and mid 60s and early 50s.
Okay, all right. Susana?
As my brother said, we come from a large family, and I was the middle, so I came right after my brother here. And so what I really liked about our family is that we never had a dull moment. Because when you put us all together, we could play kick the can, football, baseball, and you put another big family together, you would think we were having a tournament or something. And the fact that the Guadalupe Church was our backyard at that time, and so there was always a empty field there, So one thing is that we had a lot of space to roam. And when you come from a big family, you tend to be big explorers too. So one of the things, all summer long, we were always visiting all the different creeks. I don't think that there was a creek in Austin that we didn't get to to visit or explore and swim in or pick up tadpoles. And we lived at the Palm School swimming pool all summer long, from the moment the water was put in to the last drop was drained out. And so I have to say that even though we came from a poverty background, like my brother said, we didn't realize it because we had so much to do, and it was real. Those are my most cherished memories. Is always going places and doing things, and maybe we didn't own a vehicle, but sometimes my dad had the company truck, and being able to go to the theater up in Montopoulos, the outdoor theaters, the drive-ins and stuff. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a real good memory, but also it was a time when there was a lot of racial divide. Like my brother said, if you cross the street, that was the beginning of the African American communities. Some people say that's where it ended, and we live where we say the Mexican community began. Some people say that's where it ended. But so you would cross the street and you were the beginning of the African American community, at least to us. So we got to experience a lot of time because there was a lot of racial tension at that time. And I think the real height of racism, because we were born in the 50s. And so when you look at that time period and growing up in 50s and 60s, that was a real volatile time period growing up.
What about your parents? Give me a little background about your parents, and because both of y'all, I'm sure that probably other members also in your family that are activists, but y'all are the ones that I know, and I know that y'all are out there. I mean, you're really, it's in your heart, and you're trying to do everything for your community. That pride. Was that instilled in you by your parents, and what were they doing to make sure that y'all at least had a little bit better opportunity than they did?
Well, my dad only had a half first grade education. My mom had a third grade education. She only went to third grade. So, but they were really, really faithful to the church. And they instilled that discipline into us that, we had to go out to the church and to help. And through the church, through the CDC, the youth programs, they through them, with their help, they taught us the skills and to live and function in the environment we were at, because the church had a lot to do with how, and my dad we had to go to church. It was just like discipline on us, and then my father worked really hard, and Sunday was just a big treat for us, because that was the time when we were, the day before we killed a chicken, or, we raised chickens and stuff, and different types, and we would, have a feast on Sunday. So that was a big day for us. And my dad used to love to watch football, so I used to sit there with him, and we would watch football, and then it was just all the family would get together and have a good time on Sunday. So my mom was just a stay-at-home mom. She had all the kids. She had to take care of them. She did her best, considering, the low income that we were having. That my dad was with we worked 5.5 days, and sometimes overtime, and just to feed us. So, I saw the struggle that he went through, and my dad always told me, he said, no seas pendejo. He said, you stay in school, you get the education. Do you want to be like me, working, struggling like this? And that's what I got out of it. I said, no, I'm going to listen to you, Dad, and I'm going to improve myself, and I'm going to finish high school and get me a good job. And that's what he kept after me about.
And the thing I got from him, that even though we had to teach him how to write his name as we went to school, we began to teach them how to do things, because before he used to just sign with the X. but he was a very good, respectable man. Everybody would say, "Oh, Mr. Mike." His name was Miguel, but the African American community loved him because those special occasions like birthdays or first community, he would do a big cook. He would cook, and then he'd send plates to all the neighborhood. He'd say, "Go, ándale, lleve los platos," and so everybody would love. Everybody said, "God, here is your festivals or your celebrations." But your dad always thought about the neighbors and always shared what he had, even though it wasn't much. He always shared that. And then he always voted. And to me, that was important. He would take us, and even at those times, when I didn't know how much he understood, but he knew that he taught us the importance of voting and being involved.
You had to pay your poll tax.
You had to pay your poll tax at that time. And so to see that, even though my dad was a very humble, very simple man and worked, like my brother said, from the moment the sun wasn't even out, but he would work early in the morning because he didn't own a vehicle. He had to walk to work and then walk back after long days of work. I think that he instilled a lot of ethics in us about taking care of your family the best way you could, no matter what. He was very respectful. He wasn't somebody that was, cussing or stuff like that. He was a disciplinarian, but for a reason. He was a large family. And my mother, too, she always had, was making tortillas, had food smelling. I remember lots of good times with, frijoles and butter and mantequilla and doing the tortillas. And she was sort of like our doctor, when because we didn't have our personal doctor, but she knew about how the healing. She would have her spider webs and tell us, not to knock them down. When we got cut, she would heal us. And the only time that we would have to go to the emergency room was because the cut or something was so big that she couldn't heal it. But she was very spiritual. We had our altar there in the house, and we prayed. And during stormy days, we would, she would have us there praying. And so there was a lot of praying going on in the house. And she had her ways. If it was lightning, we covered the mirrors and stuff like that. But I think that was so important because we always knew that when we came home, our mom was going to be there. That there was always somebody there at the home. And that, to me, that was real important, is that we know that she was always doing things, but that she was always there. And she had a garden, and to me that was real important. Like Maria said, we had, our chickens. We were real sustainable back then. We had our garden that, we would grow and work on, every year. And so I think that those real basic things about not forgetting where we come from and then working the earth, sustaining ourselves. We used to go, we were farm workers, we'd go pick cotton during the summer to make, extra money and stuff, the whole family. Now my mom, she was always home with the little one.
And mom always used to get up early in the morning and had all the tacos ready for us to go. And we were living right next to that troquero, the truck. Mm-hmm. So we had to, at 5 o'clock in the morning, we were gone, so she would get up at 4 and make all the tacos and ready for us to just...
as I listen to y'all telling those stories, your lives in so many ways is very similar to mine. Mm-hmm. My family, the same way. My parents, same way. Mm-hmm. And yes, we lived in a 2-bedroom, 7 kids, and 2 adults, 2 bedrooms. Didn't have running water, outdoor, everything. Very similar. Mm-hmm. The only thing was, we lived a very sheltered life. So when they would take us to the area donde vivíamos mexicanos, because we lived across the river there in Victoria, Guadalupe River. So when we would take us to the little tendajo for them to go buy the groceries, they would say, lock the doors, put up the windows, don't talk to no one. And later it found out that a lot of those people that, the kids that I was growing up with would turn out to be, that we were told don't talk to no one, would turn out to be doctors and lawyers and all of that. Yeah. So, I know what you're talking about, because this is very, very similar also, but entirely different. Right. When smaller community is so different from a larger community. Now, let me ask you about, how did y'all become involved in the Brown Berets?
Susana was the first one. She introduced me to Ernesto Fraga, which was sort of, I guess, I'll let her explain that, because
Well, I met Ernesto back because I used to work at the East First Street Neighborhood Center with James Ramirez and John Trevino and Gonzalo. It was like the hub. It was where all the activism was happening in our community. Back then was the neighborhood centers. And at that time, Ernesto was working at the neighborhood center in South Austin Neighborhood Center. And so we got to know each other and date each other and stuff. And then about, I think in 73, he invited me to go to a Brown Beret meetings that they were putting the Brown Berets together, and they've been meeting at Cristo Rey Church on 2nd Street. And I think back there was Father Lanirez. He was the one, he was real activist priest, and he'd been active in so many things, but he was sort of like helping to sponsor or hosting the Brown Berets, letting them meet there at the church. And so I said, well, sure, I'll go check it out and see how things are going, what they're doing. And so I went to the meeting, and that's what they were talking about. They were talking about, police brutalities and how do we need to work with our youth, how do we need to protect our neighborhood. The barrio was the key word. And, and at that time there was a whole issue about carnalismo. There was a lot about brotherhood and sisterhood and about la familia and trying to improve the communities. And this was all things that I believed in as growing up was, I was all about family because that's where I came from. Family, we knew other families. And so to me it was always about bettering the community because I had that experience of, living in a segregated, community, and then also being, because we were, poor and we spoke a second language and all that. So I'd grown up understanding a lot of different things in the way how society was. And so when I saw a lot of young people wanting to make change, I was very inspired about it. I had already been involved in the high school, organizing and help organize a Chicano walk out there, trying to change student government at the high school. So I'd already been very active in my life. And so when I got to the Brown Berets, I thought, oh, wow, this is another group of young people wanting to make a lot of changes.
How old were you at that time?
Well, I had to be about 20, 21.
And so
how
did she recruit you?
What happened, I had become really politically active with the Raza Unida Party. I mean, I was just, all what they stood for was, the fight that we had about immigration, police brutality. It was just, to me, and I was working, I had just graduated from high school in 1970, and I was working at Education Service Center Region 13 that I had a job in. And so this was one of the greatest things that happened to me because, we had some really active ladies in that organization there Bob Perkins' mother was working there. She was one of the creator of Caras Calenda. And I just was floored to see higher up Mexicanos, Mexican American, being in a position where they're highly educated, respected, and I'm going, oh my God, this is wonderful, that they was treating me, a Mexicano that was always looked down upon, even as somebody, was respect, and they said, oh, mira, they would look at my face and said, puro indio, Yeah, and so, but at the same time, growing up there, and we moved up to Inks Avenue, which is between 9th and 8th Street on Navasota, which is across the street from the State Cemetery. We were constantly being picked on by the police. There was nowhere we could drive around without getting stopped, being assaulted, being told, hey, Mexican, and getting put in jail. And I mean, I was caught driving. The biggest insult was I was 2 months away from being 21. I had a quarter bottle, a beer bottle that was empty with a little bit in the back seat, that was left there, and I got stopped. And they said, they charged me for minor in possession and took me in jail. And I'm here, I already had my wife. I had a son there, and I'm going, wait a minute, what are you doing? He said, y'all Mexicans, shut up, and they put me in jail. So I was really frustrated with the way that we were being treated. Racia Unida gave me the outlet to go out there, and I since then on, I'm part of the Democratic Party now, but, I really believed that was going to be the solution to get our respect that we want. And that's what motivated. And then when I met, Ernesto Fraga through Susana, and that was like in probably about 72 or something like that, 73. And he was telling me what his plan was. I said, this is great because I want to be part of that, and because we need to tell the police to quit abusing our people. We were getting beat up. It was the young people back then, they could never say anything back to a police officer if they got stopped. If they did, automatically jail or in a beating. Mm-hmm. And no one would say anything about it. They'll just say, oh, those damn people, they deserve it, And that's what frustrated me, and that's why I joined the parade, because I know that in the power relies as a neighborhood that gets together, and with all of us together, we were going to stop this injustice that was going on. And it was, at that time in Austin, you could not go across Congress, west of Congress, without at night. They would tell you, don't be caught on the other side of Congress at night, because you were either going to get beat up or put in jail.
Mm-hmm. So when you all got together, met Ernesto, and then the formation of the Brown Berets here, about how many members were there at that point, at the starting point?
I think that there was a good 15 people at that time. I think there was always had been a core about 10 to 15, maybe 20, a good core group. Because there's always people who come to activities and meetings, but a core that was real active, I would say like 15 to 20 people who were very active and always doing things.
So how did you, Susana, because I know that you were one of those individuals that, for the Latinos' perspective, getting involved and then also standing for your principles and saying, hey, this is what some of the issues that we should be dealing with. How did you come about in trying to get the other members to sort of follow you in that path?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things where there were quite a bit of young ladies that were part of the berets. And so one of the things was, how could we work, the women together to do programs? Because one of the programs we did was like feeding the youth during summertime. Because one of the things where a lot of our kids now we're getting into the 70s, and a lot of parents that used to be stay home were no longer could afford to stay home. Now we're talking about two parents working, and a lot of the children kind of hanging around. And like I said, we would hang around at Palm School, all from morning to day. Our situation was different because we could go home and our mom would be there and should have food ready. So we started this whole program where we'd make fideo and beans and tortillas and have a whole group of people, and we would feed the kids. And then they began to know that at lunchtime they could come to the Centro Chicano and that there was going to be a meal happening. And that kind of progressed to having other activities for kids, saying, what can we put together? Other members who had connections to people who had like ranches in Leander, certain programs. It was making those connections of how can we take our kids out of the barrio and show them other places, but happy places, and do campouts and stuff like that. It was working with them, and it was also working at that time. Paul Hernandez was sort of like the chair or the leader of the Brown Berets, and it was also working with them to say, well, if we're talking about building the family, we also have to make sure that the females are involved, not just in the cooking and doing the work, but also as being the spokesperson, that they had to be sort of like a duality. If Paul was going to speak, there needed to be also a woman speaking, because we were supposed to be representing the family, and so that we needed to have, a male and female presence all the time. And those were issues that were also discussed in the state level as the Brown Berets got together at the state chapters to talk about the whole structure and the whole representation and the different programs.
So, one of the things that I find very interesting is that y'all, in a way, were taking the motherly approach.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of the Latinas in the Brown Berets at that time were married?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
I think a lot of them were still not married. They got married during the Brown Beret process, like Crystal Mendez was Elias's Mendez sister. She got married during the Brown Berets to another Brown Beret guy. Angie Mendez at the time, her brother Elias Mendez was in. She wasn't married at the time either, right? She got married later on.
Yeah, but Eli and Angie,
I'm sorry. Eli and Angie got married. That's right.
He wasn't.
No, they were, Angie was Angie Torres, but she wasn't married at the time. But did they get married during the Brown Berets?
Mhm.
Or yeah, so relationships started from there.
From within the membership.
Yeah, but at the time there was a lot of the young people were not married. Like Joanne Salas, she wasn't married at the time, but they grew and then she married.
Paul was married.
Paul was married,
But
yes.
his wife wasn't a beret.
But his wife wasn't. So there are a lot of relationships, I think, manifested during the Brown Beret struggle, and then there was married. But at the beginning, I remember most
Sam
of the
was
girls were
married.
single.
There was a couple married people, but the wives weren't that really active in the berets at that time because they were raising a
They
family.
weren't.
Oh, they
so.
weren't.
That's why I say the girls, the single ladies or young ladies, they were single. Then along the process got married. Some of, like you said, the guys who were, their wives weren't.
And we did we were at that time we were facing a big problem with spray paint. Well, our kids were doing spray paint, so we were doing a lot of outreach work, and we had younger people like Zeke Ivade and Eli Mendez, and those are the kind of people that had saw the discrimination in the school district and how they were being treated and how, everybody was just, every year got promoted, whether you learned how to read or not, they didn't care. They put you in a remedial class. They would say, just, give you a 5th grade book and say, just read that and just be quiet and we'll give you a B and you don't even have to bother, just as long as you behave, we'll just pass you on up. And and at the same time, we were seeing a lot of the little junior high kids and elementary kids that were a little older getting into spray paints, dipping glue, gasoline, which is, we said we need to stop this. We need to stop this abuse of our kids, and we need to educate them. So that was one of the functions that Centro Chicano took on. And it was started by the Brown Berets, but the Centro Chicano was an organization too we had control of we started Centro Chicano, but we let that be the outlet where we would do all the outreach work. We would work with the kids and at the same time deal with the political issues that we were facing because police brutality was really horrible. In fact, our group, the Brown Berets, were the first group in Austin that started filming police officers. We would have a little patrol, and every time they would stop someone, we'd be across the street filming it. They would get so upset. But we got a grant and we bought a video camera, and we would just sit there and anytime, we had a little hotline every time they called us, we would go out there and just film them, you know. But that was later on, not at the very beginning. But we had a hotline for police brutality that they could call in at the centro, you know. So.
As a matter of fact, just to follow up on that, is that the Brown Berets really are the reason we now have the Police Review Commission now, the police monitor. That was one of the main recommendations that came from the Brown Berets, was a police review board. But of course, at that time, we wanted them to have subpoena powers. So way back, the Brown Berets was the one who brought up that issue, who protested, and you always see that, you know, community review board now is because there was a height of, like Bill says, of police brutality in our community, and something needed to be done about it. That's why it was like, it didn't matter where you went, you know, you were always harassed by the police, and especially at night, you know, it was very controlled as to where you could and could not be at. And so I think that it was the Berets, like you said, initiated these projects for the youth, looking at, you know, youth development, looking at taking care of the next generation, looking at the police and the police monitoring, the review board. Those are all changes that have now come about, but that the Brown Berets really worked to initiate, you know, a long time ago in the early 70s.
How did y'all decide that Centro Chicano would be located where it was? Did y'all just happen to see a vacant building and say, well, that's where we would like to rent? I'm assuming y'all were renting at the time. That's where we would like to have this, or was there a reason for that location?
I think that someone had it that I can't remember who owned the house. So it was somebody who knew the person and who supported the Brown Beret issues, because it was the first one was right there on San Marcos Street. And so it was somebody knew someone who had that property and who was willing to let us use it, because I know it was very minimal of what was being paid. You know, they probably could have made 2 or 3 or 4 times the amount. So it was somebody who really supported the group and the different, what we were working for and stuff, that made it all happen.
That first place, there was a period that the Berets kind of just like split because there was disagreement. So we ended up, that's how we moved out of we actually didn't move, we ended up closing the San Marcos Street. And then another incident happened where a police officer, a parent called a police officer. He was having a problem with his son right there behind on Seta Chavez, which was First Street, Johnny Boy's, and the father ended up getting killed by the police officer. And here's the guy that called the police officer, you know, and he ended up getting shot by the police officer. And this was just outrageous, you know. So we had a big demonstration, marched down to the police, and through the help of the Buen Pastores, the Methodist Presbyterian Church, they offered us a building, the house there on Willow Street, right next to it, which is now a daycare center. And that's where we set up our shop. Because of the church there, they offered the building to us free. So we moved our Centro Chicano there. So
now in Centro Chicano, when y'all did move, if I can ask, what did create that little split between that, you know, said, well, okay, we're going to move to another location? And was it after or before the fire, or am I getting to different locations?
The fire was way after. The split happened was because we were demonstrating there across from Palm School. Palm School had closed, and Barry Gillingwater was wanting it to really that was the end part of it. It was more of the funding that we were getting stipend. The speakers, the leadership were getting stipends to go out and speak and getting money, and we were running really low on paying the rent and the utilities and all that. So we wanted that money to go into, part of that money go into funding the place. And the leadership said no, because we're earning the money. We got families to feed and all that. So that's what happens, that we had to end up closing that place. So.
Well, Centro Chicano, I know from what I hear and from what I've read, had a great impact on the community. Ramon Maldonado came in one day to talk to me after the MAC Oral History Project, the program that we did at the MAC, and he told me how he had been one of those young kids sniffing glue and everything. And I was really taken back by him because he wouldn't allow me to do an oral history interview, and I understood that. But he did bring me some of his artwork, some pictures of his artwork, and articles of kids that he worked with and everything. But one of the things that he brought me also was a photograph of him being a Boy Scout. Was it a leader?
Cub Scout leader, I think he was a Boy Scout.
And that really floored me, because here he was talking about himself as a little boy, being a troubled youth, being blue sniffing and everything, and he was accepted into Centro Chicano and was told, you do away with all that, you do what we tell you, you will, you will learn, you will do all of this, and that's what happened. And so it was at that point that I really started pushing, for more information. Because I get it from him as, it changed me. It changed me. And like I said, I wish he would have allowed me to do the interview, but I understood.
He's a great artist.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, definitely. But the story, it was one impact with him. Now, Susana, I know that you, because of your involvement with the Brown Berets and your wanting to make sure that children were always, taken care of, and that y'all did programs and everything. Tell us about the Leander field trip that you took and the kids at Zavala Elementary.
So what we did is we took several times. We took a big group of the kids down to Leander and Elvia. Remember Elvia Castro? She had the connections, and there was a lot of people that knew that worked with certain camps, and they were able to say, well, we can get that camp for a weekend. And so we'd all, they get to camp out. For a lot of kids, it was the first time like going somewhere fun to camp out, where you're not working in the fields or something. You're just camping out, and we did a whole, list of activities that we were going to have. Get up and make pancakes for the kids in the morning, and then do hay rides, do sack races, just all kinds of just really fun stuff. Just have a good time, and let the kids be out in the nature also, be out in an open environment. Even though a lot of our communities is not as full as it is today. It was pretty open, but this was even more open because you're out in a ranch and you're getting to do a lot of different
You're out
things.
in the country. It's still there. It's a real beautiful little place, but we were out in the country. A lot of these kids never have left the neighborhood. They didn't even know what it was like anywhere else. So, and that was the things that we did. I by that time I had already gotten a job with IBM. And IBM would give us $1,000 for community funding. So I would apply for these grants and to buy all kinds of little items. And one year we were able to take the kids to Six Flags.
So your employer supported your efforts in what you were doing with the Brown Berets then? I mean, if they're giving you grants or stipends and,
through the Centro Chicano,
Centro Chicano. So that was a good thing, to have a big corporation like that. Now let's go back to this field trip and to others. I mean, here there were members of the Brown Berets accompanying y'all, going with y'all. So that meant that the parents of these kids trusted y'all. That y'all would take care of them because they were going to be gone for about a week or so. So, and then going, in vehicles to the location. And And, kids will be kids. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're going exploring and, they get lost or whatever. But that was another thing. Now, we do have a photo here of that.
Yeah.
Can you...
And this is one of the photos that camp out in Leander. It says June 74 here, that it got printed here. And you can see that, I believe right here, they're getting ready to go on a hayride. So you'll see, all the little kids and then some of the members there also going along with them for this hayride. And that's why we're saying that, like Bill was saying, there's a lot of times they never got to do things like this. This was like their only outlet to go like all together in a big group and be riding around at the camp and being out on the ranch is a beautiful sight and stuff. And so this was something that we did several times, was always trying to bring the youth and getting them exposed to different areas, because that was one of the things the Brown Berets was about. It was about looking at the future generations and looking care of our youth. And because we were family structured. We were always about taking care of our own brothers and sisters, and we were preaching that we were all one family, whether it was blood relations or not. We were in that time when we were talking about carnalismo, so all the children were our children, and so we worked to try and do activities, to do fun activities, education activities, teatro Chicano, making sure that our kids didn't get stuck onto all the glue sniffing, like he was saying, the paint sniffing, all the stuff that was going around in our communities, trying to steer them in a different direction.
And whenever we saw each other, it was like hugs. We would just hug it was like family. We just, so we really, when we saw someone, either a kid or, your friend, it's a big hug and, glad to see you. And, it was just like a big family. So that was what, kept us together, and the kids really saw that we respected them. We never was, we weren't like authority, like you got to be here, be quiet, doing that. No, we just treated everybody just like equal.
By that time, did you have a family? Were you already married or still single?
I was married. I had by that time I had 2 sons.
So in a way, too, being a father and doing this, it helped in the family structure.
Oh yeah, and they were part of they were there too. I always took them with us.
That's good. Now, we have a document here also that was very much a part of what actually organized the Brown Berets in Austin and chapters throughout Texas, and actually I think Colorado and some other states also. Let's talk about the manifesto and what impact it had on the Austin chapter and how it came about that y'all became part of this document.
Well, this the Brown Beret manifesto. One of the things that people would do was they would get together, at least the different chapters from the state of Texas, and one of the big meetings they had was looking at putting together the manifesto and then looking at what were the issues. And you would find that no matter if you were in McAllen or San Antonio or Dallas or Houston or Austin, that the issues were the same. So when we talked about it, we talked about police oppression. That was a big issue, and how we were going to address that, and how we were going to work with the community, and and the community, like I say, the Community Review Board was a really big issue for all the different cities in the state of Texas. The other thing was we looked at, of course, expanding the Brown Berets chapters and looking at these issues. And then we looked at immigration was another issue we looked at, because immigration and immigration rates have been going along for a very long time. I know a lot of the new generation think it's a new thing, but the immigration rates had been happening back then. And so one of the things that the Brown Berets wanted to look at is how do we address the immigration issue, and also making sure that all the materials were bilingual, that they were in Spanish and English was very, very important to us. And then we look at the whole issue of education to make sure that what we want to make sure is that our history and our culture were also being in the books, because nothing about us was in any of the books or any of our history, any in our education. So that was a big issue to make sure, and also to make sure that that we were also becoming like the teachers and the professors within the education system. That was a real big. And then housing, we looked at housing, looking at affordable housing. I mean, that's been a long issue for us, or just fair housing, just looking at housing that was economically safe, and was a safe place for our families to grow in and stuff. And then we look at prison reform, just because the majority, and still to this day, it was our people who were in prison. And so how do we address that whole issue of reforming it so it's actually rehabilitation and not just spending your time there in the prison? And then we looked at medicine, making sure that there were free clinics, health clinics, having access to the clinics and so forth. And then we looked at communications, that we need to put together our own media, our own newspapers, our own radio shows, our own TV, but look at so that we could tell our side of the story. And so communication was a real big thing for us also. So, I mean, when you look at the Brown Beret Manifesto, those are still the issues we're working on today: health, education, in housing. We're still dealing with police, police brutality and killing.
Because at that, you also got to remember at that time too that farm workers it was a big movement too, because in Texas, they still had the short hose that they cut the handle off the hose. The campesino would work out there and work in the valley, and they had to, in order to make sure they worked, they give you the little short hose, and you had to go out there and work. And we were demonstrating. The Berets was one of the main force behind the demonstration, because we were not going to be intimidated by police force. The campesinos, a lot of them were Mexicanos that were working the fields, and they would get scared if they see the Texas Rangers and the DPS officers. So we would go out there and be sort of like the guard during the demonstrations, and we would walk and make sure, and we had our little walkie-talkies and communicate and bullhorns, and so we were more like with the manifestos behind us, and we were more like the guard of the demonstration of La Raza movement. Whenever we used to go down to Midlands, we used to go down to the Valley, we went to Houston, because the activists there in those little towns were constantly finding themselves committing suicide, they would say. They would pass out on the track and get run over by the train. They would find them hanging in the cells. That was a lot of what was going on at that time. So, we said we got to the point at one time where we had a Constitution Convention where we declared ourselves independent, of Texas, and we created a SLAN. A SLAN was supposed to be, and because that's how fed up people was. We had a big convention in El Paso one time that declared our independence, because we weren't going to take it anymore. So if it would take whether we had to be at war, we were going to do it, because we weren't going to take the abuse anymore that we were receiving at the hands of what we call the rinches, the white police force in Texas. So.
Of the manifesto, there's about how many? 8? I can't remember how many of the goals that y'all were setting out.
Yeah, there's.
What would be, let's say, 4 that y'all really considered as a chapter to be the priority? And we'll say 4, but it could be more, but we'll
I think
prioritize.
that one of the priority was the whole issue of the police oppression was really, that was a real big priority, and education was very up there with it, and then housing was another big issue. I don't think we labeled like youth development or youth, but that's definitely, I think, just in all of these issues. Economic development was another big one, but I think the communications were more up there just because we did have like young people that was teaching us about videos, we had access to people who putting out the newspaper, or people who had access to radio. So communications was something also that was real heavy up there. But I think the number one issue was, of course, police oppression. But then I would say education came right out there, communications. And,
jobs.
Economic development, jobs and
That was
stuff.
another.
Those are really top issues. And the other ones kind of feed, or they go parallel to them, you can't really. But like I said, we never did, even though we didn't have like youth development or youth leadership, it was very much there, because everything that we did was about youth, and it was about working with them at some capacity, like whether it was giving them the skills, whether it was showing them different models of programs. We did a lot of workshops, like knowing your educational rights, knowing your rights as a student. The Teatro Chicano was like doing a lot of role play, educating what people would now call probably popular education. Using those tools, those are the things that we did back there during the Brown Berets.
Now, how did y'all manage? Again, we're going to, there weren't that many members, but how did y'all manage to get all these supporters to march with y'all, to be out there with you? I mean, somebody would get beaten up by the police, and by that night or the next day, got people marching. You got, hundreds of them. How did y'all do that?
Well, like I said, even though we were members, we all had families. So, like, we came from a family of 10. So that time the family is already growing, and I think all the other families are very much connected. So in either way, like we were saying, even though the spouses were, but maybe they had other family members that belonged to that family, so it wasn't really hard. And besides, the people were just looking. The people wanted to be active and wanted to do, and they might have not wanted to be in the everyday affairs, but when there was like a beating or a killing, everybody in the barrio understood it. It didn't take much for it to spread like wildfire, with people who did have phones, people who visit. I think there was a lot more communications happening, even though, people talk about the internet and all that. No, there was a lot of communications going. People basically went to the same stores, they went to the same churches, they went to the activities. There was a lot of talk always happening, and there were like radio stations that announced it, and there was newspapers. And so I think that the support was there all the time. There's always the people waiting, like, okay, who's going to lead it? And then they come in. They're willing, and that's exactly the way it was. If there was an issue, all you had to say, there was going to be a protest at the police station or whatever, and the people were ready, because it was really impacting their families. But they weren't taking that leadership role. But their families, like you said, there was not too many people who hadn't gotten harassed by the police in one way or another, and so they understood that issue very well.
Or being discriminated,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know when I interviewed Frances Martinez for the MAC Oral History Project, Frances, she talked about how the voice was given to that community, and her being much older individual, but through Paul Hernandez, who went and showed her and her husband how they could get money to repair their home, and the zoning issues and all that. And that was shown through them to them by the Brown Berets. So she said, they were going to do anything to help, even though they felt that they didn't have the knowledge and couldn't really communicate as well as the younger, they were still going to do whatever possible to support whatever y'all were doing. And this, again, it's amazing, because I go back to the ages that, y'all weren't that old. I mean, and yet the older generations, the older individuals listening to the younger generations. And which is another thing too, when I'm in working with this project and doing the photo exhibit that we will have at the Terrazas Branch Library. And I mean, we're limited to the number of photographs that we can have there. So I mean, to me, there was many more that I could choose from, thanks to you, Susana, and to Gilbert. But there were some photographs that Gilbert sent me of some young boys. And y'all, along with the Brown Beret, started a youth beret chapter.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about that, because I find that fascinating. And I would love to get one of those individuals, I thought about it after I saw that, on the panel to see what impact it might have had on them and in their lives and what they're doing today. But anyway, can y'all talk about the Youth Beret chapter as to how that got started?
Well, it really got started when we moved to we always worked with the kids, the little kids, but it got started there at on the Cesar Chavez, when we were moved to the Cesar Chavez, because Buen Pastor was expanding their daycare center, so the church kind of asked us if we could find another place, so we moved to Cesar Chavez location. And we had a whole bunch of kids that we had worked with that were getting into their teens, so we said, let's start a Junior Brown Berets. And that was like Zeke Uvalde and Eli and them was working with those kids. And we would have, what was so nice about the Junior Brown Berets is that we could have fundraisers now, and they would do the work and raise money, and we would use the money for them, so. I mean, it almost sounds like the Catholic Church, the CCD, which is probably based, that's how we grew up.
Yeah.
So, we started having fundraisers and letting the kids make decisions on what they want to do with the money and give them some responsibilities and stuff like that. And that helped because also their friends started coming over. So we had no problem, if there was demonstration, they know that we're going to take care of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we also, now you can look at some of these kids and they're white hair now and all that.
Well, and that's the thing, when I look at some photographs, because just recently I came across, and I think it was maybe one of yours, or maybe one of Gilbert's, but I think it might have been one of yours from the contact sheets. It seems like they always paired these young people, these youth, with a member of the Brown Berets that had been a member for some time. Because you see that. And you see Paul Hernandez, there's a photo image of Paul Hernandez with two young boys next to him. And at first I thought, well, that's just, some kids that are, but then when I found about the Junior Brown Berets, that's when I put two and two together. But it seems like as I look at some of those, it seems to me that, those kids were wanting to be right there and supporting and learning.
Oh, yeah.
And learning about that. Now, another image that I got from your contact sheets was the Brown Beret, apparently there must have been some type of maybe a caravan, maybe a demonstration, and keeping cars from going across, maybe Festival Beach or whatever. There's a caravan of young kids on bicycles, and it's like a chain, and the cars are on the other side. And to me, that was something else to see these kids on these bicycles, not letting anyone go across. And I again, that's just an image that I keep in my mind, and it will be part of the online website exhibit that we're going to add. But unusual, again, it's kids, and so that is the one thing. Another thing that I found, of course, I don't know him very well, but Shorty and the Corvettes, y'all had him perform at the opening of the second.
Luke Ortiz.
Yes, yes, and he was performing there, so he's going to be one of those individuals also that image is going to be in the exhibit, because again, you get different perspectives of how people were supporting. Now, in reference to supporting, who were some of the community leaders that you can name right now that were out there supporting the Brown Berets? Whether they be elected politicians or, individuals in the community that were really well known. Were there some that you can name that were very supportive of the Brown Berets?
There was very few elected politicians because they didn't like the word Chicano in the first place. They always argue about that. I was the more political person in the group. Every time something politically happened, they would blame me for not talking to these guys. Gonzalo and John Trevino and Richard Moya. Some of the first people that got elected, and I would say, hey, I have to work for these guys because they're our leaders, and the only way we're gonna be able to get along and get things is to support these guys. But there was a time that we came up with the idea, Paul Hernandez and that the other groups were really fed up with our politicians at that time. They were and I said, okay, well, the only way that we're going to win is we need to go out there and start organizing the precincts. So we ran a whole bunch of people as our precinct chairs, and we got people elected. So then we went after the Tejano Democrats. We were going to replace them, and we were one vote short of taking over the whole political group of Tejano Democrats here in Austin. Back then it was Mexican American Democrats, of changing the whole leadership. That's how strong we have gotten to the point. We got Marcos de Leon elected as county commissioner, and so that's what, through the political process. And so we didn't have too many political people that really were supporting out the Brown Beret. We had a lot of community leaders like Senor Rendon, Pete Martinez, Francis Martinez, people that from the community that were of good standing that were supporting us. But through the political politicians, they didn't trust us. So that was the split that we had here in Austin.
And I think too that like you said at the beginning, we didn't have any politicians, because I think Richard Moya was the first one, and John came into, I think, 74 or 70, I can't remember like the year. So it wasn't until later till people really got elected. But I think that also at that time, I think those people who were getting into the political realm had to be real cautious about association with a radical group, because some people did see us as a radical group. They saw us as a militant group, and that's the way we were being portrayed by the status quo, that we were this militant group. That we were never being looked at like we were a grassroots group, which we were, who were trying to improve our communities and the lives of the Mexican American community. The status quo would always look at us as this militant group, and I think also because we wore, uniform khakis and stuff, that made us look like we were this real militant group. But really, we were just trying to be organized in our work, and also so that people could identify us. as a group, a grassroots group who were working together. And at that period of time, you have to look, that's how identification was done, was how you wore, how you dressed. So that we were at that period of time of when that's how you express, what group you belong, whether, it was the Black Berets or whether it was the Army and the Green Berets, and us as the Brown Berets. So there was this really thing about having, uniforms and the being together and stuff like that. So yes, mostly it was a community support, and that's really the people you really want until you get people in office who can understand that and who do then have to support the issues that you're working on.
Because you got to look at one thing too, is that at that time, they were developing, they put a power plant right in the middle of our neighborhood. They took all these homes that people lived right around Fiesta Garden and just eminent domain. Mm-hmm. They were getting $2,000 or $3,000 for the home. They had all this vacant property at the fish hatchery, which is RBJ now, and instead of building a school there, because they had other plans, they went and took the Salvation Youth Army Center there on where Sanchez Elementary is at, and it was just a little small section of land. There were houses all the way around, and they kicked everybody out of there, the eminent domain, that whole. So, there was a lot of injustice going on with a lot of people in that area, so they were really fed up. We didn't have any political power, we didn't have any kind of economic power, and we were just getting pushed and pushed and pushed and taken. And so, it wasn't very hard. They just didn't have the people there that the ones that politicians that were elected at that time were trying to please the other people. They weren't really out there, demanding a lot of justice. So that's where we came in and said, "This is it, ya basta." We were not going to take it no more. Mm-hmm. And so, and when people saw that we were not afraid to stand up, they just came out and they just really supported us, and that's how we were able to do the things that we did, because it was the people behind us that really pushed us. We would have never gotten there without the support of the barrio.
Yeah, it was a lot of the people power, the community power. Really, there's a lot of empowerment of the community, because that's who we had to rely on. You had to rely on the masses of the community, thrusting forward, showing up, packing the meetings, packing the city councils, packing all the different meetings, marching in the streets, taking signs. And so it was a lot of activism that was happening, and it was the community power itself, the empowerment of the community, that was really driving the changes.
Yeah. Because now I know that I'm going to cut it short in a little bit here, mm-hmm. but a question for each of you. Your role, your involvement in the Brown Berets, what stands out, has had the most impact in you and you, Susana, as to what really you were proud about, having been a Brown Beret member, and what the outcome of it was?
Well, the thing that makes me proud is that, the respect that we have now in the community, and we're slowly losing it now because the city's growing so big, but it gave us the dignity to look up and say, we are equal to you, the power of West Austin. And that's what really, I feel good about it, is because, my kids can walk down the street, whether they're black, brown, white, and not be afraid, and that's what, really I feel that we accomplished, that we're not afraid anymore. We're people of power now, so we're not bowing to anybody, and that's what we did.
And the amazing thing about you and Lori is you're out there rubbing elbows with mayors and all of that also, and both of y'all are. But that is the amazing thing about that I see. You know, when you go back and you listen to these interviews, you read these articles and so forth, is to know the struggle and then to see the outcome. And y'all are very involved in politics and so forth. So that's what I see. And so obviously you have done some excellent work here. But now, Susana, what about you?
Well, I like to see what I'm so proud of is that there was a lot of unity. Is that there was a lot of community involvement, participation, and to me, that's the key. Is that you brought so many people together who realized that they did have a voice, that they weren't really voiceless. I think the empowerment of individuals, the empowerment of the community is like the most beautiful thing that happened during that whole Brown Beret movement, was empowering the community to say, you're not voiceless. You can stand for something. You can voice to make changes, and you can be part of that change, you know, and you deserve changes in your community. Things should be better. And when I see the changes, even though now we're taking a back step with a lot of the gentrification, different issues that are now impacting our community, but I see how far we progressed, that movement had helped thrust us to the forefront of really not being afraid. Not being afraid to speak up, you know, of working for justice, of saying that we have as much right as anyone else to equal education, to not be oppressed by the police, to have housing, economic development, all of the issues that, you know, that we still work on today, but to say we have a right to be involved in that process and to make changes. And when I look at that movement, and I see people still working in different issues. They're not with the Brown Berets, and some people have left. Some people are not as active, but some people remain very active. People have started their own organizations. You know, they started their own businesses. They're still involved in community issues, and so, and that we left seeds for that next generation. You know, because I run into some of those people, and they don't forget about being in the Brown Berets and being exposed to the Brown Berets, and always, you know, we got to keep fighting for the rights of our people.
I think that too, as I see it, and as I see the progression that each of you have taken, and those individuals that were members, again, I find that to be very amazing because as young people, you were out there, you were doing your thing, you could have very well gotten yourself into trouble, could have given up, you could have drifted in another direction. You know, be into trouble with the police as far as being in jail, in prison, whatever. But it's amazing how each of you as members have taken that role, put it into the community, and started to be, you know, very involved. I mean, the fact, Pio, that you ran for city council, and Gilbert Rivera ran for city council, and Paul Hernandez ran for a position, Marcos de Leon, as you mentioned, also ran and was elected. And I think he was the only one of the Brown Beret members that had been elected. But then again, too, I see, you know, where Uribe has got his PhD, and I think Joanne Salas also has got her PhD. And so it is how, you know, you see all of this, that the struggle was very evident, but again, it's still the involvement with you, Susana, with Poder, and also we're still continuing to work with the youth, still being very active with that. So now, let me ask you this question. As you look to the future and Austin and the way that it's going, the expansion, everything, what do you see for those individuals, for the neighborhoods that you were really trying to fight for and to, you know, what do you see the future of that being?
You really wanted I see it, I don't see how it's going to survive. It's really heartbreaking to see the things that are, we're so close to downtown. Nobody liked us back then, but now, they say, oh, that's a gold mine over there. When you have University of Texas teaching people how to flip property, and you have all this money that's coming down from the low bond, low interest, where these developers are just coming in and buying all the property up. I see it like the reversal of what used to happen, where the developers wanted to break the white neighborhood. They would sell one house to the black, and everybody would just leave the whole neighborhood. Now it's just the reverse. These guys are coming in here paying big money for the houses, property selling for $200,000 just the land itself, in some of these locations. You got houses at Garden that's advertising right now at $640,000. It just, there's no way that, because of the tax structure is set in this state and how the Republicans really want to punish us, that we can survive in that little community. Because when the taxes are going up to be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year, it's very hard for people to hang on there. And the homeowners are the ones that, well, they're not going to get hurt too much, but it's the renters. The renters are the ones that are just. I've seen people that have rented a house for 40 years in my community. 40 years. I thought they were landlords. And then all of a sudden the next day, the owner sells the house off, and they have no place to go. They have to leave Pike to Lockhart, Maynard, wherever they can find affordable housing. So we're losing our community slowly. But it's just going to be only the ones that are the only ones that are going to be able to survive there are the ones that, either planned and saved up a lot of money so they can pay their taxes, or the ones that the younger generation that, was lucky enough to buy there that have good jobs. They're the ones that's going to stay there. But our community is it's slowly going to go away.
It's not deteriorating, but it's being taken away.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sad part.
And for me, I do see, I think now with the single-member districts finally coming in, that there'll be that opportunity to at least try and impact a lot of communities, because, I don't think Austin's going to get any smaller as far as the Latino community. I mean, we're already in the schools, we make up like 65% of the population, and we're about, I think, 37%, give or take, of the population here in Austin. So I think what's going to happen is what the city's always doing. One time we were on this side of Austin, on the west side here, around where the Austin History Center is, and now we're on the other side of the highway. And the new projection is the new East Austin starts at Highway 183, and I already see that development with all the money being thrown over there, the affordable housing that's being built, everything. And so it will be just a shift of where that new community is going to be starting and where it's going to be. And you already see a lot of the unwanted things going east of 183. So it's the new East Austin. So I think that there's always going to be, the need to organize, the need to bring betterment to that new group of people that's going to be, and that we always call the urban reservation, because, following the model, they want the land and move you. They want the land and move you. That continues to happen. But I think that the new single-member districts is going to be able to at least create some kind of balance, because now you're going to have representatives from those communities, and there's going to be a lot of education that needs to happen. But they're also talking about their potential for 3 or 4, Latino districts, the possibility. So when you look at that and you see the growth, it's just making sure that you do that education and that you register the people, and that the people that do get elected are very sensitive to the needs of the poor and the working poor and the community at large. I think that's really important, because you can have people there, but they have no roots and then have no sense about what's happening in the community. So that's real important. So I still see a lot of different hope, because as our population continues to grow here, I think that we're going to have a lot of power. And I know just now, just in the few years that you've been here, how we've documented so much of the history that could have been lost forever about, the Latino community, the things that they've done here, business people, educators, whatever. We now have that documented. I see Silvia Orozco working on the 5th Street corridor of the Mexican-American history from Republic Park on, making sure our history is in Republic Park. So I see a lot of that changing coming around, where people really want to know a lot about our history, where they want to celebrate our history. Now the whole city celebrates Cinco de Mayo. This is now being celebrated at the state capitol. These are things that never happened before. So I think that there's been a lot of changes, and I think that change is going to continue to be. And because we have a constant influx of people, that we're always going to have to be looking at bilingualism, people coming in and having to continue to make sure that we have things that are bilingual and that the culture. So I still see that aquí estamos y no nos vamos, we're here and we're not going. It's just that, yes, a lot of changes are, maybe the old neighborhood is not going to be the way, because we already see 78702, it was like the most gentrified zip code in the whole nation. So we know it's here, but we also know that we're not gone yet. And that's supportive in that history. Having the roots, and being able to just like document here of what's happening, so people will know what was the struggle, and that, yes, it takes a lot of struggle to make a lot of changes.
And that was a reason why we fought so hard for the Mexican American Culture Center.
Yes.
It's they wanted to give us a Fiesta Garden. I said no, we're going to have it on the west side of 35, because it's going to remind people that the struggle that we had, and we didn't want it to be isolated in some location where it's hard to get and people don't want traffic to come in there, and so it's those little things. We are not going to get forgotten. Yes, our neighborhood is going to be gentrified. Would it be all white? I doubt it. There's a lot of Raza that's moving in there too. They're a little more wealthier and they can afford those kind of places. But most of the population going down southeast, Those Springs, William Cannon, that area. So, but yeah, East Austin, we're going to be there. I'm not planning on moving and collect cans and do whatever I can to pay my taxes, But
well, I do want to thank you for allowing me to do this. I mean, like I said, this is a small condensed version of an interview, because there's so many questions, but at the same time, so many things that y'all have done as members, and so many, a lot of hard work. And I know at times there were people that really were looking at the Brown Berets as troublemakers and as everything else. But as history is going to show, it was done at a pace where, yes, they were doing what they felt needed to be done, and it was support of their community, the love for their community, the love for their family, the love for their neighborhoods. It was all, as you said, a unified group of individuals, young, yet at the same time going from feeling it in their heart. And usually, I know sometimes the heart over the brain can get you into trouble, but it's all right, because that's what we were born with. You need to have love and kindness for everyone. So I do thank y'all for doing that. Now, there is one picture right there that is just, I think there's a celebration, and y'all were getting ready to, y'all had just moved to the second location, I think, maybe.
This
is the only photograph that we have of the Brown Beret members as together, as celebrating. And the names of the individuals, we have them in the back. But that happened to, it looks like a very happy time for y'all. And there was,
Yes.
are either one of you in that photo?
Bill
Yes.
is.
Bill, okay, all right.
Where are you, Bill? Can you
Right there. With the mustache. That's Bobby Chapa. That's Sam Mendez. That's Roy. And, what's his
Roy Soniga.
No, Roy. That's Roy Antaveres.
Oh, it says right here, Soniga.
And that's Adela. That's Sam's daughter. And that's Sam Mendez's wife and Sam Mendez's uncle there. And that's at the First Street, the one that could burn.
Yeah. But that is, that's one, like I said, the only photograph that we have of a gathering. You know, I do have a,
There's a photograph.
I have some, but
There's a photograph in when we were in the Q house too, and it was I saw it at Danny Ruiz Museum.
oh,
Hmm.
oh.
Yeah, and it was a real big photograph. They blew it up, and it's not there hanging anymore, but it was there last year when I went by there, and I saw that photograph, and that was at the Quintanilla house.
Continue house.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate this. I am looking forward to the October 19th program when y'all will be on the panel along with Gilbert Rivera. And Lilia Rosas is going to be the moderator for that panel discussion, so I thank you for that.
And this is that's Jose, the guy that you talked to yesterday,
Oh.
or the day before yesterday.
He is in every picture, ¿verdad? I mean, and I was
Jose
really
Cantu.
impressed
Jose
with
Cantu.
him. I was impressed
Wow.
with him because
Mira,
he
Jose.
seems to be in a lot of photographs. And I am hoping that I will be able to do an oral history
Oh,
interview
good,
with
good.
him.
He's a veteran Marine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, but you know, I have learned so much, and this is very important, again, that we document all of this information.
She's the executive aide of the church, Greg Hamilton.
Oh,
Yeah, that's Sam's daughter. What's her name? I can't remember.
Oh, it
She was
doesn't
one
say-
of the.
it doesn't say her.
This young lady here, she was so good. I mean, she was one of the best fundraiser or that. I mean, she would go to a person's door and they would never tell her no. She was just so good at raising funds for us and everything. She was just a darling. Yeah.
Okay.
well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it, and looking forward to the
Francis.
exhibits and to all. I mean, we have a full month of October, lots of little events, and hopefully we have done justice to everything because it needs to be documented. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could call her. She worked for Greg Hamilton.
Okay, Greg Hamilton's off. Okay, all right. Yeah.
She's that's her dad, Sam Mendez. And that's Florence. I mean, is that Florence? That's her name. I can get you her name.
Okay.
If you ever want it.
Yeah.
I mean, she was one of the young.
The younger ones.
How
yeah.
different Jose Cantu looks here. I recognize him with his hair. I kept thinking, who is that? And now you tell me that's Jose Cantu?
Yeah.
Well, because I can't recognize him with that hair. Wow, that's Jose Cantu, you sure? Wow.
And you see, he wouldn't have said until that photograph, that newspaper article that y'all were looking at that has you and Adela and him. And it just says, and that's why I had to ask, are you sure that he was a member?
Let me see the.
Yeah, it's just
over
like,
here.
that was the thing, it was like, oh my God. But yeah, last time that we were there for Cinco de Mayo, there's in there somewhere is
it's Jose.
as him and, oh, let me get my glasses.
Oh, yeah, I don't want to remember your glasses.
But Bio and Adela and Jose. But I'm like, oh my God, you know, He's in every picture. It's just
Yeah,
like,
he's-
I mean, he's in that very popular picture that, what's his name? Who was the
Yeah,
photographer?
he's in that Ruiz library at that Q house. He's in there too. Mhm. I told him, I said, Jose, I saw your picture over there. He said, why? I said, what?
Yeah, I just chose some to put in there, but it's like, try to put it in chronological time period.
Did you ever find that picture when the one that we were at San Marcos when we had the meeting with the police chief?
Yes, and that's going to be in the exhibit. That will be in the exhibit.
That for it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's that guy from Dallas.
Oh, yeah, that's one.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Father Joseph Natas? Sure is. Father Joseph Natas right there.
Yeah, in the exhibit, he will, the Father Sonatas will be there, and the online, Pete Martinez also.
Mm-hmm.
But in the online, it will have both of them too. So there's the
There's
picture.
Bio and
Yeah.
oh, that's Jose there?
That's Jose, that's
Oh, that's
Jose
right, that's
Garcia.
Jose and Angie. And it does it says Jose Cantude.
But I didn't know he was a member of, and so until he mentioned that.
Yeah. He wasn't he wasn't in the leadership role at all. Let's say what
Just a member of that.
he was that's why you probably didn't hear much about him. But he sure wasn't the picture, so.
Yeah, he managed to get to the picture, so, but yeah.
Oh, that's Sam's other little daughter.
Oh, okay.